Yet there is hope. The first reading today states that the Lord will rain down bread from heaven for you. He will test us to see if we are following His instructions. Can't you see some correlation with our trials and hurdles in life as tests of faith? In the second reading today, St. Paul declares that we must no longer live as the Gentiles do, in the futility of their mind. That is not how you learned Christ. That you are to put away your old self, your former way of life, corrupted through deceitful desires, and be renewed in the spirit of your mind, and to put on the new self, created in God's way in righteousness and holiness of truth. In the Gospel, Jesus instructs us to not work for food that perishes, but for the food that endures for eternal life. Jesus stated that He is the bread of life. Whoever comes to Him will never hunger, and whoever believes in Him will never thirst. It is time to rescue our families from this culture of death. There are 4 points to consider when trying to live a truly Catholic life. The first point is that sin is the cause of all unhappiness in the world. The second is no matter what sin has been committed, God's grace can overcome that evil and that destruction of the soul. The third is that we are all called to holiness. And the fourth is that we are to consecrate our lives. There is one sin, however, that will surely secure a place in hell for many. It is the sin of omission, the act of doing nothing. To continue to allow our current culture to form our children and us without fighting back is surely a sin of omission. To sit back and to do nothing only allows evil to flourish. But doesn't going to Mass on Sunday make me a good Catholic? You tell me. What if I walked into my garage each week and just sat there? Would I eventually become a car? Think about it. Just walking into church each week, just sitting there, does that make you a good Catholic? As I mentioned previously, being Catholic is not a spectator sport. It is a life of action, of sacrifice and prayer. It is also a life of joy and profound happiness. Living the gospel is living the good news. If you don't understand your faith, as many of us only have limited knowledge, there is no excuse in this day of modern technology to not learn it. As you learn about our faith, it brings about such deep meaning and beauty to our lives. Beauty that has always been there, but unnoticeable because of the lack of knowledge and understanding. We need to read the Scriptures. St. Jerome stated, the ignorance of the Bible is ignorance of God. We need to use the sacrament of confession. A friend once asked me why he needed to go to confession monthly. He stated he didn't murder anybody, he lived a pretty good life, and he didn't think he sinned very much, at least not those big sins. I shared a story of a housewife who was so very proud of how she kept her house, especially how clean her kitchen looked. And then one day, one of her children spilled some milk on the floor. So she immediately scrubbed up the spill and stood up to view her accomplishment. What she noticed was that the area where she cleaned was spotless, but now the rest of the floor appeared dirty. Only minutes before the spill, she was completely content with her floor, believing that it was clean, now only to realize that the filth had been slowly accumulating without her perception. The same is true for us. Sin can slowly accumulate in our lives, even unnoticed at times. We can be content in our lives and complacent, even though sin has attached itself to us. It isn't until we begin to look closely at our lives and our behaviors and receive the grace from confession that we can clearly see our lives, our actions, and our state of holiness. Grace not only allows us to see life clearly, but allows us to avoid future sin. So what is the point of this homily? Today's readings were very clear. God will rain down His graces for us, but He will test us to see if we're following His instructions. We must not live as the Gentiles do. We are to put away our old selves, our former way of life, corrupted by deceitful desires, and be renewed to put on the new self, created in God's ways of righteousness and holiness and truth. We are not to be consumed by the desire of worldly things, for all worldly things perish, but for that which endures forever and leads to eternal life. For the bread of God is that which comes down from heaven and gives life to the world. That is our sacrament. Jesus states that He is the bread of life. Whoever comes to Him will never hunger, and whoever believes in Him will never thirst. We are to embrace our faith. We are to embrace being Catholic. We have been given everything. Are we truly living this gift, or are we just going through the motions? As I mentioned before, being Catholic is not a spectator sport. Begin today living out your Catholic life. Embrace the gift of our faith. Read the daily readings. Live the gospel. Learn your faith. Pray the rosary, and socialize with other Catholics. Frequent the sacrament of confession and accept God's grace. Mothers and fathers, fight back. Form your children and teach by example. I was once told that if a person teaches a child the faith, it might stick. A person can teach a mother the faith, and it might flow over into the family. But if you teach the faith to the father, and he embraces that faith, and teaches that faith to his family, all will be converted. If fathers truly become the spiritual leaders of the family, nothing can stop us from rebuilding Catholic communities and ultimately defeating this culture of death.